There comes a moment in every human life when you look at yourself and say, this cannot be it. I'm meant for more than this. And in that moment, you don't need a map, you don't need perfection, you need a breakthrough, because every day you and I get pulled into patterns so familiar, so automatic, that we don't even question them. Patterns of doubt, hesitation, fear, excuses, and stories we repeat until we start believing they define us. But hear me now, you are not your patterns, you are the creator of them, and that means you can break them. Awareness of limiting patterns begins with the courageous act of looking inward and seeing the truth of how you've been living. Most people move through life on autopilot, repeating the same emotional reactions, the same doubts, the same excuses, the same cycles of behavior, without ever realizing they're trapped inside patterns created years ago. These patterns often stem from experiences, beliefs, and interpretations that were never questioned. They become the silent blueprint shaping how you think, feel, and act. When you become aware of them, you realize that many of the limitations you face are not external. They are deeply internal and self-reinforcing. You start noticing how often you hesitate before taking action, how often you choose comfort over progress, and how often you talk yourself out of possibilities because of old fears or stories that no longer serve you. Awareness is powerful because it exposes the invisible. The moment you shine a light on your patterns, you take back the ability to choose. You begin to notice that the feeling of not being enough is just a pattern. The habit of overthinking is a pattern. The urge to avoid discomfort is a pattern, and patterns can be changed. This realization is the first opening, the first crack in the wall that has kept you confined. It gives you the clarity to see that life isn't holding you back. Your unconscious repetition of the same emotional and mental loops is. As you deepen this awareness, you begin to observe your triggers and responses. You start seeing how certain situations immediately cause you to shut down or retreat. You recognize how certain people or environments activate old insecurities. Instead of reacting blindly, you pause and examine. You ask yourself why you respond this way, where this reaction came from, and whether it represents who you want to be now. With each moment of awareness, you loosen the grip these patterns have had over your identity. You begin to understand that you've been living based on outdated programming, not your true potential. Awareness doesn't mean judging yourself. It means being honest enough to acknowledge the truth. It means seeing the gap between who you are and who you want to be, not with shame, but with curiosity and determination. You stop blaming circumstances and begin reclaiming responsibility. You understand that every pattern you identify is an opportunity, a doorway to greater strength, clarity, and self-mastery. Once you recognize the patterns holding you back, you can interrupt them, challenge them, and ultimately replace them. This is the foundation for all meaningful transformation, because you cannot change what you refuse to see, and the moment you become aware is the moment change becomes possible. Taking back personal power begins with the realization that change is not something that happens to you. It is something that happens because of you. So many people wait for circumstances to shift, for motivation to appear, for someone to push them forward, not realizing that this very waiting is the pattern keeping them stuck. Personal power is reclaimed the moment you decide to interrupt the cycle of hesitation, excuses, and self-doubt that has been running your life. It's the decision to stop handing your future over to fear, to stop giving your energy to limitations, and to stop believing that your past has the authority to dictate your next chapter. When you acknowledge that you have the ability to redirect your thoughts, influence your emotions, and choose your actions, you step into a state of ownership that transforms everything around you. Reclaiming your power means understanding that every feeling, every outcome, and every result in your life begins with a choice. Even when things happen that you cannot control, you still control the meaning you give those events and the actions you take afterward. That's where your power lies, in the interpretation, in the decision, in the response. When you shift from reacting unconsciously to responding deliberately, you stop being a passenger and start becoming the driver of your life. This shift is not loud at first, it's subtle. It's the quiet voice inside that says, I can change this. I can choose differently. Over time, that voice grows stronger and your actions begin aligning with the identity you want to build rather than the identity you've been repeating. Taking back personal power is also about breaking emotional patterns that have kept you in a weakened state. When you constantly feed your mind with thoughts of worry, inadequacy, or fear, your energy becomes paralyzed. But when you deliberately shift into states of courage, clarity, and determination, you reclaim the inner force that makes movement possible. Power isn't found in pretending everything is perfect. It's found in choosing to rise even when things are challenging. It's found in the decision to no longer let old beliefs dictate what you attempt or how far you go. This kind of power grows as you make decisions anchored in intention rather than habit. Every time you choose action over avoidance, every time you choose growth over comfort, every time you choose your future over your excuses, you strengthen the muscle of personal power. You begin to trust yourself more deeply because you see that your choices matter and your actions create change. And the more you act from this place, the more unstoppable you become. Not because life gets easier, but because you finally recognize that the authority to shape your life has always belonged to you. Embracing emotional shifts means understanding that your emotions are not just feelings, they are the fuel that drives your actions, decisions, and the overall quality of your life. Most people try to change their results without ever changing the emotional state that produces those results, and that's why they stay stuck. You cannot create a breakthrough from a place of fear, hesitation, or hopelessness. You can only create it from a state of strength, certainty, and passion. The moment you shift your emotional state, everything around you changes because you begin to see possibility where you once saw limitation. This shift is not about denying your emotions or pretending you're always strong. It's about mastering your inner world so that you can respond with intention instead of reacting with old conditioning. Your emotional state determines what you notice, how you interpret situations, and what actions you take. When you're in a state of fear, the mind narrows and focuses only on what could go wrong. When you're in a state of empowerment, the mind expands and begins looking for solutions and opportunities. The difference between moving forward and staying stuck often comes down to the emotional lens you're using in the moment. Recognizing this gives you the ability to change your behavior at its source, not at the surface. You begin to notice when you're slipping into patterns of frustration or doubt, and instead of allowing those emotions to control your next step, you disrupt them by consciously shifting into a more powerful state. Emotional shifts happen through movement, focus, and meaning. When you change your physiology, your posture, your breathing, your energy, you instantly affect how you feel. When you shift your focus from problems to possibilities, your emotional state elevates. And when you give an empowering meaning to your experiences, you stop feeling like life is happening to you and start feeling like life is happening for you. These small shifts accumulate and create momentum. They turn emotional paralysis into emotional power. They turn uncertainty into determination. They turn stuckness into action. Embracing emotional shifts also means being willing to feel discomfort as part of your growth. Every transformation requires stepping into new emotions, courage, resilience, confidence that may feel unfamiliar at first, but the more you practice entering these states intentionally, the more natural they become. You begin to operate from emotions that support your goals rather than sabotage them. Over time, this emotional mastery becomes your foundation for change. It allows you to lead your life instead of being led by temporary feelings. It helps you break old patterns, not through willpower alone, but through the internal strength that comes from aligning your emotions with your highest vision. Rewiring the mind through new decisions begins with understanding that every belief, every habit, and every pattern you repeat is the result of decisions you made in the past. Some consciously, many unconsciously. These decisions form neural pathways, automatic responses, and interpretations that eventually became your default way of living. But the powerful truth is that your brain is not fixed. It is constantly rewiring based on the choices you make today. A single decision made with full conviction can interrupt years of conditioning and redirect the course of your life. This is why transformation doesn't require waiting for the perfect moment or gathering endless information. It requires deciding with absolute clarity that you will no longer live according to the patterns that once dictated your emotions, actions, and expectations. When you make a new decision, you create a new direction for your mind to follow. You send a message to your brain that says, we're no longer doing it the old way. The moment that decision is made with full emotional intensity, you create a new standard for yourself. You stop tolerating what drains you, and you start stepping toward what strengthens you. The mind begins adapting to this new standard by forming new associations, new interpretations, and new habits. Every time you reinforce the decision with action, the brain strengthens the pathway, making the new pattern more automatic and the old one weaker. Over time, what once felt difficult becomes natural, and what once felt impossible becomes familiar. Rewiring the mind also requires being intentional about the meaning you attach to your experiences. When something challenging happens, you can choose a meaning that weakens you or one that empowers you. If you choose a meaning rooted in growth, responsibility, and resilience, your brain begins forming patterns that support confidence rather than fear. You start experiencing life not as a series of obstacles, but as a series of opportunities for expansion. This shift in meaning creates emotional momentum, and that momentum makes it easier to reinforce the decisions you've committed to. New decisions demand consistency. The mind changes through repetition fueled by emotion. Each time you show up, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable, you're proving to your brain that this new path matters. You're teaching yourself that your future holds more influence than your past. You're breaking the cycle of letting old stories define your behavior and choosing instead to create new stories through deliberate action. Rewiring the mind is not about perfection, it is about persistence. It's about choosing again and again to align your decisions with who you want to become rather than who you were conditioned to be. Over time, these decisions compound, creating a mindset that naturally seeks progress, embraces growth, and supports the life you are committed to building. Stepping into unshakable momentum means moving beyond the initial spark of motivation and building a consistent rhythm that carries you forward even when your emotions fluctuate. Most people start strong but fade quickly because they rely on excitement alone. Momentum isn't created by one grand action, it's built through repeated choices that reinforce your direction. When you take steady, purposeful steps each day, you create an internal force that becomes harder to stop the more you nurture it. Momentum gives you leverage. It turns effort into flow and hesitation into movement. It transforms change from something you're chasing into something that begins working for you. This is why the individuals who seem unstoppable aren't necessarily the most talented or the most confident. They're the ones who learned how to generate momentum and protect it. The first part of building momentum is breaking the habit of waiting for inspiration, waiting for clarity, waiting for a feeling of readiness keeps you anchored in old patterns. Action creates clarity, not the other way around. When you take even small steps forward, you signal to your mind and body that you are in motion. That motion produces energy, and that energy fuels the next step. Over time, this compounds and creates a force far greater than what you started with. Momentum builds belief. It reinforces the idea that you can follow through, that you can grow, that you can shape your life intentionally. Protecting momentum is just as important as creating it. This means being mindful of what slows you down. Distractions, negative influences, old habits that drain your focus or confidence. You strengthen momentum by creating an environment that supports your progress, surrounding yourself with empowering people, feeding your mind with powerful ideas, and eliminating the noise that keeps you stagnant all contribute to sustaining your forward movement. When your environment aligns with your goals, momentum becomes easier to maintain because you're not constantly battling against forces pulling you backward. Momentum also thrives on standards. When you raise the expectations you have for yourself, you naturally begin making choices that reflect those higher standards. You stop negotiating with your excuses and start acting in alignment with your identity. Each action you take becomes a vote for the person you are becoming. Over time, the gap between your intentions and your actions closes, and you develop a sense of certainty that fuels even greater action. This is when momentum becomes unshakable, when it's driven not by fleeting motivation, but by a deep internal commitment to your growth. As this momentum builds, you begin to experience breakthroughs more frequently and with greater intensity. Opportunities that once felt out of reach become attainable. Challenges that once intimidated you become stepping stones. Momentum makes the extraordinary feel possible because it keeps you moving, learning, and expanding. It becomes the engine that drives transformation, turning small, consistent actions into massive long-term results.